If you try typing Rothschild into Google's search bar, you'll probably open a portal straight into the abyss. This family sits at the center of the most wildly different conspiracy theories, from controlling the weather via satellites to controlling almost every national bank. They've been accused of everything, except the one thing that truly matters. Because all these theories miss the fundamental point. Reality doesn't need black magic to be terrifying. For the Rothschilds, math was enough. The Rothschilds didn't become unimaginably rich through occult plots, or simply by being bankers. No, they quite literally engineered the operating system that still runs the global economy today. We're talking about people who turned King's debt into what we now call the bond market. People who were doing high-frequency trading with carrier pigeons while Wall Street was still using paper and ink. And this matters to you far more than you think, because the spread that terrifies our governments, the tax haven mechanisms multinationals use to dodge taxes, all of it has a father, and that father came from the Frankfurt ghetto in the 1700s. Today, I'm not going to tell you the story of a family. Today, we're going to perform an autopsy on the financial system we live in, to understand how on earth 5 brothers managed to clamp golden handcuffs on all of Europe. Welcome to Amazing Europe. It all begins in a place that looks nothing like the glass towers of the City of London or Wall Street. We're in the Frankfurt ghetto, an overcrowded, filthy strip of land where Jews were literally locked in every night. This is where Mayer Amschel Rothschild is born. And this is where the most brilliant deception in financial history is born. Now, to understand how Mayer went from selling coins at a stall to managing princes' treasuries, we need to strip away the fairy tale rhetoric. Mayer doesn't get rich because he's good. Mayer gets rich because he understands, before anyone else, a fundamental problem of the wealthy: how to hide money when the world is on fire. In practice, Mayer invents what we might today compare to shadow banking, namely, a discreet wealth management system that operates through a trusted network of intermediaries rather than through the era's traditional banks. His golden goose is called William IX of Hesse-Kassel. Who was he? Essentially one of the richest men in Europe. He made his money in a questionable way. He rented out his subjects as mercenary soldiers to the British. A dirty business, but one that generated mountains of cash. But William had a massive problem, the same one oligarchs have today: too much liquidity and too many enemies ready to seize it. The enemy, in this case, was named Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1806, the French army invades Germany. Prince William is forced to flee into exile, leaving behind a fortune the French could hardly wait to confiscate. And this is where Mayer Amschel steps in. Legend has it that Mayer hid the gold by burying it in the garden. Nonsense. If he had done that, the money would have sat there dead. Mayer did something far more ingenious. He applied what we would now call regulatory arbitrage. It sounds like a complicated phrase, but the concept is simple. If the laws in Frankfurt say, "I confiscate everything," you move the value to a country where the laws say, "I let you invest." Using a network of trusted couriers, he converted the prince's physical treasure into credit instruments and pieces of paper. He made it disappear from Frankfurt and reappear as if by magic in London, where his son Nathan was. Just think about it. Mayer managed to handle and move hundreds of thousands of pounds in today's money, a staggering sum, despite the surveillance of Napoleonic police. The French in Frankfurt were ripping up floors looking for gold, but they found nothing. Why? Because the value had been dematerialized. But pay attention, because this is the crucial step. Mayer was not stealing that money. He was still working for the prince. The deal was simple. I'll save your wealth from the French and guarantee you a fixed interest rate so you lose nothing. The prince agreed, happy to save both his skin and his fortune. But Mayer knew something the prince didn't. Once that money was safe in London, Nathan could use it to make high-yield investments on the English markets. The prince received his modest agreed-upon interest, sure, but all the extra profits generated by investing that immense sum? Those went straight into the Rothschilds' pockets. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the birth of modern wealth management, or if you prefer, the ancestor of today's hedge funds. The principle is the same one we see today. The Rothschilds used the money of a major investor, the prince, to place their own bets on the market. They created a structure in which the real owner of the money is hidden behind a wall of secrecy, while capital moves freely across borders. Sound familiar? It should, because the mechanism is identical to the Cayman Islands accounts we see today, here in our 2026. The separation between who owns the money on paper and who actually manages it is not a modern invention. It was engineered in Mayer Amschel's back room while Napoleon was knocking at the door. A proverb says, "Time is money." But for Nathan Rothschild, sitting in his office in London in 1815, time wasn't money. Time was everything. Today, in our 2026, hedge funds spend billions of dollars digging tunnels through mountains and laying fiber optic cables straight as arrows. They do it to gain 3 milliseconds of advantage over competitors between the Chicago Exchange and the New York Exchange. Does that sound insane? Well, Nathan Rothschild invented this game 200 years ago. Only, instead of fiber optics, he used fast boats and horse relays. Welcome to the concept of information asymmetry. To understand how the Rothschilds hacked the system, we have to go to the most important day of the 19th century, June 18th, 1815, Waterloo. All of Europe holds its breath. Napoleon versus Wellington. It's the World Cup final of geopolitics. If Napoleon wins, the war continues, and British debt will explode. If Wellington wins, Europe enters an era of peace, and the British economy will take off. In London, the British government waits for news. The newspapers wait for news. But Nathan Rothschild doesn't wait. He built a private network. While the government relied on slow messengers, the Rothschilds had built a logistics infrastructure worthy of Amazon. A chain of stables along the Brussels to Ostend route to swap out exhausted horses on the fly, and a fleet of light ships ready to sail through any storm. The result? Nathan receives news of Wellington's victory at least 24 hours before the British government. And here, we need to clear the air. For years, a legend has circulated that Nathan went to the exchange to sell, trigger panic, crash prices, and then buy everything back for next to nothing. But that's not how it happened. The truth is far more sophisticated and financially brutal. Nathan knows something the others don't. Napoleon has lost. The war is over, and he understands before anyone else the economic impact of peace. At that moment, everyone at the London market looks at government bonds with dread. They think, if Napoleon wins, England will go bankrupt, and these pieces of paper will be worth zero. Nathan instead knows those bonds, which are junk in everyone else's eyes, are about to become the safest investment in the world. So while the city is paralysed by fear, Nathan goes against the herd. He buys, and he doesn't buy a little. He orders his agents to scoop up everything. He commits the family fortune and even borrows to buy even more. It's a massive bullish bet. If the information he'd been given had been wrong, the Rothschilds would have been bankrupt that very night. When the official news reaches London, bond prices surge. Those who sold out of fear are left kicking themselves. But, and this is where the real financial genius lies, Nathan doesn't sell immediately. He holds on to the bonds for almost 2 years. He understood that with peace the British economy would take off, and those bonds would rise again and again. He bought at the moment of maximum terror and cashed out at the moment of maximum reconstruction euphoria. It wasn't a scam. It was a strategic bet founded on information that made the Rothschilds the masters of European finance. Nathan applied what we now call information arbitrage. Today, this mechanism hasn't changed by so much as a comma. It has simply become digital. What Nathan did with horses and boats is now called high-frequency trading. The modern Nathan Rothschilds are algorithms locked inside server farms, reading central bank announcements 1 millisecond before they appear on your screens. They see the future an instant before you do, position themselves, and beat you while charging you an invisible tax. Here's how it works. You want to buy an Apple share at €100. You click buy. But your order has to travel through the network. In that micro-instant, the HFT algorithm, physically located inside the exchange, sees your order coming before it's even executed. What does it do? It jumps in, buys the share at 100 euros, and when your order finally arrives a millisecond later, it sells it back to you at 100 euros and 1 cent. You don't even notice. You assume that's the market price, but that 1 cent is the invisible tax you pay for being slower. Nathan taught us a lesson that every adult investor has to accept. The market isn't democratic. The market is a place where the winner is whoever has the information before everyone else. Information is the only real asset. Money is merely the consequence. The Rothschilds spent a fortune on logistics to receive the future a day before the rest of the world. They didn't manipulate the market. They anticipated it. And in capitalism, coming second means coming last. If Waterloo was the perfect heist that gave the Rothschilds infinite capital, what happens 3 years later, in 1818, is the moment they decide to rewrite the laws of economic physics. But before we discover how, if you found this video interesting, we'd kindly ask you to support our project by leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and clicking the bell so you don't miss our new videos. Thank you very much. Up to that point, lending money to a king or a government was a dirty business, risky, and unbelievably inconvenient. It worked like this. You went to the court in Vienna or Berlin, handed money to the sovereign, and you prayed. You prayed he wouldn't die, that he wouldn't lose a war, or that he wouldn't simply decide not to pay you back. It was a personal debt. If you wanted your money back before maturity, good luck. You couldn't sell that piece of paper to anyone in London because no one trusted a foreign king or a currency they didn't understand. The market was, in technical terms, illiquid. Nathan Rothschild looks at this medieval system and realizes it's inefficient. And if there's one thing a Rothschild hates more than taxes, it's inefficiency. So in 1818, when Prussia, which had been left in pieces by the Napoleonic Wars, comes knocking, asking for a £5 million loan, Nathan says, "Fine, but we do it on my terms." And those terms are the birth certificate of the financial system we live in today. Nathan invents the international sovereign bond. What's the magic? Turning a complicated loan into an easy-to-use, standardized product in 3 moves. First, no more strange local currencies. The debt is issued in pounds sterling, the hard currency of the era, exactly as if today we issued everything in dollars. Total security. Second, no more pilgrimages to Berlin just to collect interest. You get paid straight at the Rothschild counter in London. Absolute convenience. Third, and this is the masterstroke, he makes the bond bearer. It works like a €50 banknote. It doesn't say this belongs to John Smith. It says, whoever holds this piece of paper is entitled to the money. Do you see the difference? It's an earthquake. Before, lending to Prussia was a bureaucratic nightmare. Now, a wealthy Englishman who couldn't even point to Prussia on a map can buy that debt, knowing he'll be paid in solid currency and backed by the most powerful bank in the world. And the best part? If he needs cash tomorrow, he can sell that piece of paper to a Frenchman or an Italian a minute later. The Rothschilds created liquidity. To be clear, debt already existed in Venice or the Netherlands, but it was a local business. The Rothschilds made the quantum leap. They globalized debt. They invented the international bond market. The success is devastating. In the 1820s, the Rothschilds controlled 40.8% of all sovereign loans issued in London. They had an almost complete monopoly over Europe's public debt. But why does this matter to us today? Because with this system, the Rothschilds invented the golden handcuffs. The moment you turn a nation's debt into a tradable product, you give the market the power to judge that nation. This is where the modern concept of ratings and spreads is born. In the 19th century, there were no rating agencies like Moody's or Standard & Poor's. There were the Rothschilds. If Nathan Rothschild underwrote your loan, you were AAA. Your debt was cheap. And if the Rothschilds refused you, you were junk and interest rates shot through the roof. That power isn't just financial, it is pure political power. If a king wanted to wage a war the Rothschilds didn't approve of, all it took was turning off the taps. There's a striking episode in 1863. The Tsar of Russia wants to crush the Polish uprising in blood. He needs money to finance the army. He goes to the Rothschilds. They, who looked unfavourably on Tsarist anti-Semitism and violence against the Poles, say no. Result? Russia is financially isolated. They proved that, in this new system, whoever controls debt controls foreign policy. Now let's make that jump to our 2026. Do you remember hearing on the news that government bond yields are spiking, or that the bond market is in a panic? You're watching the exact same mechanism Nathan invented in 1818. Today, there isn't a gentleman in a top hat saying no, but there are the so-called bond vigilantes, investment funds that, if they don't like your government's policies, dump your debt en masse, driving bond prices down and pushing the state's borrowing costs up. When you hear, Europe is asking us to, or we need to reassure the markets, the real translation is, we have to play by the rules of the bond market the Rothschilds created. They built a system in which democracy has a very precise limit: debt solvency. Your vote matters, sure, but the judgment of those who hold the public debt matters more. In 1818, Nathan Rothschild put the reins on Europe's kings. And guess what? Those reins were never taken off. They were simply passed from hand to hand until they reached today's central banks. Welcome to the era of sovereignty limited by credit. By the time we reach the 20th century, many people ask, what happened to them? If you look at today's Forbes rankings, you won't find a Rothschild at number 1. Some say they're hiding their money. The financial truth is that they changed their line of work. They understood a fundamental rule: owning everything is dangerous. It makes you a target. So they moved from lending the money to advising the people who have the money. They invented the role of the economy's great directors. Instead of risking their own capital, they became high-end intermediaries, advising on and orchestrating mergers and acquisitions between corporate giants. One example above all? In the 1980s, when the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, decided to privatise Britain's major state-owned companies, guess who drew up the sales plans? N.M. Rothschild. They took pieces of the state and sold them to private buyers, collecting million-pound fees without risking a penny. Today, their firm, Rothschild & Co., is one of the most prestigious investment banks in the world. Let's be clear, it's not a bank with tellers where you go to withdraw cash. It's a bank that serves companies and governments. And it is from these investment banks that part of Europe's governing class emerges. Think of Emmanuel Macron. Before becoming president, he was a banker right there at Rothschild. And he's not the only one. Georges Pompidou, another French president, also worked for them. But the point is even more subtle. You don't need to have worked directly for this family to be part of the system. It's about breathing the same mindset. Think of Mario Draghi. He comes from Goldman Sachs, the American giant that competes with the Rothschilds in the very same sector, but the mental software is the same. Technocracy, efficiency, markets. They no longer need to sit on the throne. They understood that real power in 2026 isn't making the decisions. It's being the advisor who whispers in the ear of the person who does. The Rothschilds are the stars of endless conspiracy theories, but those theories always miss the most important point. This family isn't behind every revolution in history, but it is certainly behind the architecture of today's economic world. The Rothschild story forces a cynical reality in our face, one that has held true for 2 centuries. In the end, it's irrelevant who wins elections, whether it's the right or the left, whether it's Napoleon or Wellington, because whoever sits on the throne, the day after victory they will need money to govern, and to get it, they will have to knock on the door of those who manage the debt. The Rothschilds didn't bet on the horses, they built the racetrack. They turned physical violence into financial violence. They proved that it is far cleaner, more invisible, and more effective to conquer a country by buying its debt than by sending in tanks. You don't need to fire a single shot. You just raise the spread, turn off the credit taps, and that nation surrenders. And be careful, I'm not saying they control governments like in spy movies. They did something deeper. They revealed that governments were never truly sovereign. They proved, mathematically, that without the confidence of the markets, that is, without someone buying your government bonds, a state simply does not exist. They created a system in which democracy has a precise limit: debt solvency. Now I'll ask you the uncomfortable question. In the system we've described, Has our vote become nothing more than a little show to keep us quiet while the markets decide everything? Or does it still carry real weight? What can we do to remain active players in our own country? Let me know in the comments. And speaking of debt and money for the future, we recommend you watch this video where we reveal 10 European countries that will struggle to pay pensions in the coming years. That's all for this video. See you next time.